All right, here we go. Another episode. And, well, for the viewers and listeners at home, what's cool about this is before we started the show, we're prepping for it, and I told you, hey, I've got a handful of questions that or topics that I hear frequently out in the interwebs or social media, and I'd love to blast them at you and see what your take is. And I was about to tell you what they were, and you said, nope, don't even want to know them. Let's get the honest,
unfiltered.
Yeah, so this is cool. So that's what we're going to do. I've got some topics or questions that are out there. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not. Since we didn't actually go back and forth, I have no idea when you'll agree or disagree, and that's pretty fun. So here we go. Number 1, CrossFit methodology, of which you are familiar, states, that we're doing these universal motor recruitment patterns and, movements found in nature and demanded by life, things like that. However, I've never seen a squat snatch, a handstand walk, or a double under found in nature. So you're lying to me. We don't do these movements found in nature. And I don't see why in the world I would have to do these since they are not found in real life.
This is one of my favorite topics. I think
people,
yeah, absolutely. We used to get a lot of these type of questions at the level 1. And I think that there's a mistake if you're looking for a direct analog to, what you're going to experience in real life and the utility of training something. If you look at that list of 10 general physical capacities that you're looking to develop to be a fit, well-rounded individual, things like stamina, strength, coordination, accuracy, balance, etc. What you're looking for is movements that develop the biggest bang for your buck on that list most regularly. That does not mean that they necessarily have a direct analog to what you're going to do in everyday life. And if you do that, you take a look at something like the snatch is a great example, right? Like unlikely you're going to be out there in the world snatching away like you would with a barbell.
Right.
But you show me somebody that can snatch confidently, 225 or whatever. I have no question that person has a pretty amazing range of motion throughout most of the major joints of the body. They've got a high degree of relative coordination with the major muscle groups. They have a great base level of strength and explosiveness. All of these things you can tell at a glance. It's not an accident that those are there. So the analog to a direct, port to real world is not as important as are these developing generally.
And would that apply to also, so that's the general concept, that would apply to like the handstand walk as well. Like, why in the world do I need to walk in my hands?
Yeah. And the short answer is you don't. But
but if you can, it's usually indicative of something else.
Exactly. It's like having money in the bank. I do not question whether somebody has the upper body capacity to push themselves up off of the floor if they're strolling around on their hands. It's like, it's having money in the bank.
And it speaks to their level of coordination and the neurological components being rather well developed, their balance.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Good one there. Number 2. This is a good one.
Okay.
So a repeat or a benchmark workout comes up maybe several months down the road. I don't know how long, but it comes up again. Person does the movement. And then the question becomes, okay, I improved. Am I fitter? Or did I just have a better pace or strategy? Am I just smarter? How do I know, okay, I got a faster time, but am I actually fitter because of that?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple ways to answer that. Number 1, on a base level, I think that's why you should not train for a test. If you're looking to see if your fitness improved by repeating a benchmark, you should not have that benchmark in mind with the training that you're doing leading up to it. So for example, if I know that Fran is coming down the pipe in a month and all I'm doing is thrusters and pull-ups and different variations of that, I don't know if the improvement in that score is indicative of a better overall fitness or if it's indicative of me just getting really good at those two things. And for the generalist, the person that is enthusiastic about fitness as a capacity that lends itself well to other things, the true tell is if you didn't train specifically for it, but you still got better at it. That's the big win.
Yeah,
So,
I like that. That's a great way to look at it, actually. And I'm upset with myself that in all the times I've talked about this topic, I've never actually phrased it that way. I like that as well. I'll steal it. I'll give you credit for that as
well,
well.
hold
But
on. So then the second point I've got on that one is I think it depends on how different your approach was. So the original question was, how do I know if it was just a difference in gamesmanship or if I truly changed my capacity? And I think the answer is, well, how different were the two approaches? If you came guns blazing on a workout like Filthy 50, because you just had no experience with a big long chipper like that, and you crashed and burned just due to ignorance on how to approach something like that, and then the next time you were smarter about it, then yeah, I would agree it might not reflect so much of a raw improvement in capacity. But if the difference in your approach was not that significant, maybe as a slightly different rep scheme or, a slightly different plan, whatever, then I think you can say with a high degree of confidence that yes, your fitness was better.
And we could have another discussion that tough to tell, right? Could be a little bit of both. That maybe you got a little smarter and a little bit fitter. You'll drive yourself crazy trying to answer that topic. A far better use of your time is just to eat well, sleep well, train hard, be smart, and just let nature take its course, because good things will happen if you just keep having good days in the gym and don't, second guess. Well, hey, allow yourself the win. Hey, you got a faster time. Allow yourself the win.
Yep. And again, look at the broad trend. If that one thing improved, but everything else didn't, other things are falling off or moving in the wrong direction, well, then there's your answer right there.
Yep.
But if you had a win on that workout and everything else is kind of generally trending in the right direction, well, you got a pretty good degree of confidence that you're doing what you're supposed to.
I have this next question is further down the list, but I feel that it plays so well off this one. I'm gonna make it an on-call adjustment and go to this next question. Okay, so good. So that question was, I repeated a workout. Yes, I did better. How do I know if I'm fitter or if I was just smarter, better pacing, etc.? So now the next question is, a repeat workout comes up again. I did not PR. Oh, the sky is falling, boss. I did not PR. What does that mean? Am I less fit? Am I doing something wrong with my training? Because I've done this workout before, it came up again, and I didn't improve.
Yeah, easy answer. Quit, take up bodybuilding. I think it's time. No, of course. I mean, I think if you are expecting linear progression indefinitely, like anything in life, that is unlikely at best to happen, especially the longer down the track you get. If you think it's just going to be a straight shot from zero to success, I mean, sorry to tell you, that's just not the way it's going to go with almost anything. Fitness is no different. So I'll piggyback off the answer I gave to the last question, which is what else is happening with your numbers? Is everything generally kind of trending down? Or then, yeah, you probably need to take a look at how often are you training? Is it too much or too little? What other factors are going on in your life right now that might be affecting either your ability to get to the gym or your performance in the gym. But if that's one of the outliers, it's like, let's say that repeat dipped a little bit, but your strength numbers are up and you're acquiring new skills. You learned to do a muscle up and you didn't have one of those before. And you can point to 2 or 3 other things that are moving in the right direction, but you saw a slight dip in that one test, then I wouldn't be too worried about it.
Other things that pop into my mind, I told you were going to answer these questions, but I can't keep my mouth shut. Other things that enter my mind on this is just like you said, if you're expecting linear progression forever, well, that's great. So here's what I recommend you do. Every Wednesday, do a clean and jerk, and in 4 years, you'll be a world champion because you'll increased it every single Wednesday for the rest of your life. This is fantastic. So that doesn't make any sense. And the other part is, I was going to say CrossFitters, but maybe it's just athletes in general. But I'll say CrossFitters. I think CrossFitters are so hard on themselves because they, kind of like you said earlier with the analog of it has to be found in nature, and there's no nuance to that, and there's no context. It's an absolute. Well, CrossFit is so wonderfully effective because it is data driven. It's measurable, it's observable, repeatable. You can track your progress. That then they lose sight of the fact that there's a difference between, like you said, a PR in a single workout versus an overall upward trend. When it's it's like the stock market. An overall upward trend doesn't mean the market was up every single solitary day. It had highs and lows, but when you take a step back and you look at the 3-month trend, the trend is going up. It's not flat, it's not going down. And I think, if I've compared people's fitness before to kind of like the stock market. I think if they did that and they looked at the big picture, if you zoom in on a day, you might see a peak, you might see a valley. That's life. That's unavoidable. And that's not indicative of your overall capacity, your overall trend, and where you're heading. And another thing that I think CrossFitters are so tough on themselves and they don't realize how amazing they are, they need a full-time psychologist. I mean, for example, you could, let's say their Helen time was, just to make a round number, 11 minutes, okay? That's their lifetime PR in Helen. The stars aligned, you had a perfectly balanced meal, the whole 9 yards, get in 11 minutes, and that happened a year ago. Helen comes up again, you don't get 11 minutes, you get 10 minutes and 45 seconds. People will actually consider that like a depressive, horrible day of training. They feel, oh, I can't believe it. I was so close, but I didn't do it. And I was like, if you run the numbers on any of that, or you're used to getting 20 rounds of Cindy and now you got 19 today. Most of the time, these quote unquote losses that sadly people see because the time was a little bit below what it was. Well, if you run the numbers, most of the time, even your loss is within 5 seconds of your all-time personal best historic performance. If you're walking around just on a regular basis at like always being within 90% of your best ever achievement, that's a level of capacity that would have seemed like science fiction 20 years ago. And CrossFitters do it all the time, and I don't think they give themselves enough credit. It's a PR or it's nothing. And it's like, man, if you run the numbers, you're walking around at a supremely high level with all these other lifestyle factors varying, stress levels, sleep, these 28 other factors that are so important differ every day, and you're still within 5 to 10% of a lifetime PR. I would say that's winning at life.
Yeah,
quite
I agree. And I think to expand on that even further, it's a difficult thing to try to be good at a bunch of different stuff.
Right.
Seems like a pretty obvious statement, but that's the pursuit, is everything. So of course, there's going to be days where not everything is great. But I mean, you take a look at people that are active in a more traditional sense, and they're usually pursuing one dynamic or one modality. It's like, I run, that's all I do, and I get really good at that. But you step outside of that even a little bit, and it's like the capacity is almost zero. Or I only lift, or I only do, my recreational sport or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, the old Seinfeld out.
It's just a different pursuit.
Yeah, exactly. And one that is much easier, I think, to put the weight of that singular performance on. Like if all I'm doing is running and my running has taken a significant dip or I'm off my PR or whatever, well then, it's going to mean a lot. But if I'm running and I'm also trying to get better at muscle ups and I'm lifting and I'm learning new skills and I'm doing all these other things, one data point becomes less significant.
I think that's a concept that a lot of people would be well served. Even more experienced CrossFitters, we can lose sight of that every now and then.
Oh, I think especially because I think the gains aren't as cheap and easy as they were. And so it's easier to see those little, ups and downs the further you get along. And therefore it's easier to get your head wrapped into one and miss the rest of what's happening. So anyway.
Yeah. And that almost led me down a rabbit hole, but I'm going to make a note. I'm going to make a note. Maybe we'll talk about this next time. Okay. I got my note written down.
Not easy, Pat. Not easy to do it all. Or try to do it all.
Next one that I have, and this is something that caused smoke between my ears when I first got into CrossFit. And of course, I was coming from a much more traditional, I wasn't a bodybuilder. I didn't walk on stage, but I was doing classic bodybuilding Monday and Thursdays, chest and tri, Tuesday, Friday, back and bi, 3 sets of 10, et cetera, et cetera. Well, for example, in that world, like I said, Monday and Thursday, well, that's chest and tries. So if I'm going to do bench and incline and decline and flies, I'm doing it Monday and I'm doing it Thursday. I'm doing it twice a week. And then I'm doing it the next week, Monday and Thursday. And then the next week, Monday and Thursday. Like, I'm doing it a lot. And so when my bench press goes up, well, that makes sense in my head because I do it twice a week, every single week. Then I started following CrossFit.com in 2005, and we'll take something like a 7x1 deadlift. That might get programmed. It might not come up again for a couple of months. And we might have a week go by or 2 weeks go by that we're not deadlifting in one way, shape, or form. But then the deadlift comes up 2 or 3 months later, and I have improved at the deadlift without actually deadlifting twice a week, every week, which from my previous training, that's in my mind, I have to do things the same multiple times a week in order to see progression. Now, I'm not doing that. I don't think it's going to help me. And then the deadlift comes up, the 7x1 deadlift comes up 2 months later, somehow I'm stronger. How can I be improving at something without doing that very same lift regularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's there's a bit of mystery in that. Obviously, I think that there's it's on a physiological level. I think it's probably pretty complex, but I don't know that I have the chops to speak to that. But if you think about fitness as Greg Glassman described and started to define, fitness as this capacity that lends itself generally well to all activities, and you start to kind of drill down what that means, I feel like your answer lies within that. Part of it is the universal motor recruitment element to a lot of these movements. You know, when I do something like a clean, it uses the same musculature in the same basic pattern as dozens of other movements that don't look anything like a clean, but they, that chain of contraction is similar. And that's why you get that big spillover effect. So I don't have like a specific answer necessarily as to why that happens, but that is exactly what you're trying to pursue, is this general all ships rising type of situation with your fitness. And I think what am I trying to say there? I don't know that it is a useful activity to try to identify why that is the case necessarily.
I would agree with you on that.
It can be fun to kind of kick around theories, and for people that study exercise science on a more academic level, certainly a great question to pursue. But for the average person, I think the why is much less important than is it happening? And if it's happening, then great. Yes. You know that things are doing what they're supposed to. Again, like the true mark of a good fitness program, if we're talking about fitness as described, fitness being this general capacity, not a specific skill, the true mark of a program that maximizes that is one that does not require specific training and something to elevate that specific thing.
And it should be judged by its efficacy and it works. And I agree with you, but I think I agree with you and I get it because we're equal level CrossFit nerd and had to lecture about this stuff for so long and take these questions. But I think it's my opinion that the average human that doesn't lecture on these things full time for a living and have to answer questions from a live audience, they're fascinated by almost more so by the why than the fact that it does work. Like they can be immersed in something that works and works and works. And like, look at this, it's amazing, it's working. They're like, yes, but why? It doesn't make any sense. And if you gave that answer, like, well, if you want an honest answer, there are still some mysteries in the human body. I can tell you that it works, but precisely why? Precisely why? And it's like a splinter in their brain. Like it bothers them at a very. But
I do think that the general answer that, you're focusing on movements that have immense carryover to other activities, I think that should be satisfying to most people. And I think that when you start talking about that kind of compound yet irreducible factor, it does start to tie that together a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be very difficult for me to calf extend, hamstring curl
Mm-hmm.
and adductor my way to a 500-pound squat. It's
The
very unlikely.
transferability is not there.
Yes, right. But if I get really good at squatting, all of those other machines are kind of a joke.
Correct.
So you see the flow one way and not the other, and that's almost intuitive.
And I used to tell people also, if we're using like that 7x1 deadlift example, so okay, great. You could deadlift regularly to improve at the deadlift, because obviously if you're deadlifting, you're strengthening the muscles needed to deadlift. But if we took a step back from that and said, okay, we're not going to deadlift for a bit. We're not going to do that specific movement, but please tell me, what's the musculature that you would like to improve to increase your deadlift? Well, posterior chain, I'd love to strengthen my glutes and my hamstrings, my abdominals, obviously, my spinal erectors, my lats. Great. Well, now, can we strengthen those muscles in something that doesn't look like the deadlift? And it's like almost everything that we do in CrossFit is just posterior chain, midline, posterior chain, midline. So now I've strengthened that same area with that wonderful, almost magical element of variance by doing it in so many different ways that maybe address some things that you didn't even know needed to be addressed. And now you come back to that movement and quote unquote, magically or mysteriously, you're doing great at it. And that can be a bit confusing at first, but I think a little bit of that secret sauce is in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Oh, you got a good one?
I think so. We got
Okay.
one or two left here, depending on how froggy you're feeling. This is so
coming.
This is so great because this is a grenade that I'm going to just pull the pin and roll your way, and maybe we don't hear as much anymore. Okay, but you still do, and it's a classic. It's a vintage. Here it is. Kipping is cheating.
Absolutely, no question. Yeah, I don't even know what the question is in that one. I think that is frankly just an ignorant position that identifies you as somebody that doesn't understand what kipping is, for the most part. I mean, I think there are some people that look into it a little bit more and determine that maybe for their desired, outcome, kipping is not useful, but they still have some vitriol for whatever reason, and they just want to put it out there that way. That happens too. But for the most part, if somebody's knee-jerk reaction to seeing kipping is like, that's cheating or that's wrong, it's because they don't understand what's happening. So, kipping as a concept has existed in gymnastics movements since gymnastics was a thing. So all it is basically trying to harness the power of the hips and the trunk and express that out the extremities in a way that is more efficient. That's all it is. And so you can see that all over the place. The analog that I like to use when people have a hard time with kipping is, okay, so you also have a hard time with a push press or a push jerk.
Right, or the clean.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, those movements are also now somehow, bunk because of that. It doesn't make sense when you break it down that way.
Boss, nobody has any issue with anything done with the barbell. Barbells, you're not allowed to say anything about them, but body weight movements, okay?
Yeah.
Those have different laws applied to them. So don't confuse the waters here, okay?
Yeah. Now, I do think that there is a case there, and this kind of gets wrapped up in that sometimes too, where you have, people that see an athlete kipping, they don't take context into consideration. They don't take this person's level of fitness into consideration. And they think that, they watch somebody rip out like 20 kipping pull-ups who's obviously got the capacity to do that. And they transpose that onto a beginner that may not have that level of conditioning with their connective tissue or strength, et cetera. And they say, well, look, this is not a good idea. And we're like, well, of course, context matters. And so it's not really fair to play that mental game if that's how you're going to argue against a specific movement. You're like, look, it's not applicable to anybody in all circumstances, regardless of their level of fitness. Therefore, it's invalid for all. It's a nonsensical argument. So I do think there's something in there that does have legitimacy, that, before you're doing dynamic movements, you should be able to control the range of motion with less speed. Yeah, you should learn to, have a base level of strength before you're adding a bunch of velocity and range of motion. I think that's pretty obvious. But I don't think that negates the movement.
You know, it is a juvenile response to that question, but one that I still find entertaining, because every now and then I find juvenile things entertaining, was if somebody would be like, kipping pull-ups are cheating. And somebody would be like, well, great, hop in the bar and cheat me out 50 of them.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
if they're so cheating and easy, let's see a set of these 50 wicked easy cheating pull-ups. And of course, that doesn't materialize, right? Because kipping pull-ups aren't magic. They still require musculature and strength and all that. And I think another interesting thing is, especially coming from the military, where it was strict pull-ups and any wiggle was quote unquote cheating. And now obviously my thought process and world has turned, and now, you know, the kipping pull-up compared to the strict pull-up, both are wonderful movements, you know, and just because I do kipping doesn't think that I still love strict pull-ups. But the kipping pull-up is going to require or demand, it's a bigger range of motion just due to the swing. It's got more musculature happening. I'm not engaging my hips when I do strict pull-ups and things of that nature. It's more technically complicated with regards to the neurological components of coordination, accuracy, agility, and balance compared to the strict pull-up as well. So it's almost a little bit of more of everything. It's not less.
Yeah.
You know, it builds upon that wonderful foundation. And let's just say you happen to be in a real world situation. I don't know. You'd be a terrible life if you were in this situation, but you're near exhaustion. Maybe you're law enforcement, military, and chasing somebody. I don't know, you got to get over a fence and you're near exhaustion and you don't have the strict strength to get over that obstacle, whatever it happens to be. It would be a really useful skill to know how to generate elevation and momentum with other musculature in your body that might just get you up and over that thing. I don't see any reason not to have that wonderful skill. If, you know, it works really well to get you fit, but it could serve a good function.
Yeah. And so again, I think that the analogy of the push press works well, you know, to illustrate that same idea of I can lift more, I'm getting more musculature involved. It's a more coordinated effort. It's a very useful tool to be able to understand how to utilize. And that kind of leads me along this line of, why do people think that they have to decide? It's not a binary. Most people want to think in this like right, wrong, left, right, black, white type of thinking. And it's like, no, the whole idea is that I'm good at many different things. That's the ethos of fitness. That's the ethos of CrossFit, is I am not making the choice, kipping or other. It's like, no, I'm good at it all. And I think that CrossFitters can be just as guilty of falling into this mindset of, I only pursue one thing because it's faster in my workouts. It's like, yeah, that's great, but you should also be doing these other challenging style. How's your L-sit pull-up? How's your weighted pull-up? You know, how many strict can you do? All of those things are also worth training, because you are pursuing the generalist, Yeah. This is a terrible way to end the sentence. I feel like my mind is divided. I'm not not speaking well, but the idea is like, why decide? There's no forcing your hand. This is not a desert island scenario where you only get to take one with you. Yeah, exactly. And
what a wonderful world. You can have both. I'm a huge fan of the strict pull-ups. It's a gorgeous movement, and kipping is wonderfully effective at the same time. Yeah. The two worlds coexist. And that was a great lead into the final question, because what you just said that bothers you so much is when people have this very binary, it has to be one or the other thinking. That's exactly what the last question's all about, which is great.
Good. Okay.
So here's the final question. It's said as an absolute that you have to agree with this or you're wrong.
Got it.
I'll see this on the internet. You should not do kipping handstand push-ups because you will injure your neck.
Awesome. Okay. Oh man, can or will?
Yeah, exactly.
So again, this is one of those broad brush statements applied to a huge range of athletes with a huge range of capacities.
But
which
I
makes
saw
it just
on the
nonsensical.
internet.
Well, you didn't mention that up first. Yeah. But it's the same thing as the kipping argument. If you have somebody who struggles to hold their own body weight overhead in a handstand position, and specifically cannot control the negative, then yes, a bunch of kipping handstand push-ups is probably going to be rough on their neck to the degree that it's not useful, and they need to develop some more strength and skill before they pursue big numbers in that movement. Absolutely. But if you're telling me a Dan Bailey is going to have a hard time controlling that movement, I mean, the man has cannonballs for deltoids.
Right.
This is a non-issue with an athlete that is well conditioned and strong enough to be doing the movement correctly. I think context matters, just like everything else.
Context matters, and I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the methodology. I mean, because I would see somebody make a statement like that as if somehow, quote unquote, CrossFit, CrossFit told them that on day one of your athletic development, you should be doing a prescribed Diane with Kipping handstand push-ups. And it's like, I'm very familiar with the methodology and the lectures, and I don't recall anything like what you're saying being prescribed at any level. As a matter of fact, I tend to think about like mechanics, consistency, and intensity coming back over and over again. And somehow everyone leaps to the end of just intensity, wonders why it didn't go right. And I think it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of how you're supposed to do business, quite frankly.
I totally agree. And I think on the coaching end as well, that a good coach who's doing what they're supposed to would encourage their athletes to build up to that skill over a long period of time. And they should be the ones, in my opinion, that have the maturity to focus that athlete not just on the number that they are cranking out, but on the quality of the movement and the progression that it demands.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, can you flip upside down and bounce off your head 20 times?
Right.
It's, can you control that movement? Are you strong enough to hold the positions? Are you able to do this with a level of virtuosity that is in line with what you would expect? The coach should be holding that standard.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, I got a couple for you.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm going to have a sip of water. Get ready here.
Okay. All right. First question. Lifting before your workout. Not even a question, just a statement and an opinion. Go.
I think it comes down to want versus need. I think if you're chasing general physical preparedness, long-term health, work capacity across broad time mold domains, you do not need to do that. I think if you do variance with your training, you have, couplets and triplets, chippers, and then at least once a week, you have a dedicated heavy day. We're just lifting heavy. I think getting back to our stock market analogy earlier, you will see this wonderful, beautiful upward trend for a very, very, very long time. And I think now that's want versus need. You don't need to do it. We live in a wonderful world that you should enjoy walking into the gym. It should put a smile on your face. And if just for some reason, nothing puts a smile on your face more than sliding under a heavy barbell, multiple times a week, and that keeps you fired up to go into the gym, even though it's not necessary, well, that has value. But for most people, I don't think they need it. And especially if you are working on the classic, you just don't have unlimited time. You're not independently wealthy that you can stay in the gym for 2 to 3 hours a day. You got to get in, you got to get out, and being efficient with your time is critical. And let's just say that you have an hour, because that's a very classic amount of time. You're running a class, you're in your garage gym, whatever it happens to be. I don't think most people will do both properly and well in the same hour. And then I think, this is a generalization, I think it'll be a halfway decent warm-up, a rushed, quote-unquote, heavy day with less time between the lifts than you ideally should take. You got there potentially too much in a hurry. Then you're going to do a workout that you're already pre-fatigued for, so you're not going to bring the same level of intensity to that second workout as if you had been fresh. And we know that intensity is really a driver of results, so I don't think you're doing yourself any favors there. So now you didn't get in as great of a heavy day as you could have had you just given that all of your attention that day in a dedicated heavy day. And now the other workout isn't getting your best effort as well. So two things are being done in a less than ideal fashion. And I think that's going to lead to not optimal results than had most people focused on just one thing a day. Now, if you're talking about being a competitive athlete, wildly different discussion. That's not, I'm talking about just the general person.
Cool.
Yeah.
I concur.
And I will also, I could also say on this, and we've touched on this a second ago, I think that is really ineffective. And I think, sadly, it's becoming more common than I personally would like to see. And I think it is because human beings are human beings. They look up to their heroes, and a lot of people look up to very competitive games athletes that are accomplishing wonderful things, and look at what they're doing, and they're doing a whole bunch of stuff every day. Well, I really respect this man or woman. I should do a whole bunch of stuff a day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a one-for-one swap like that. It doesn't work that way. And I've seen a tremendous amount of people go from that, got to lift heavy every day before the workout, not happy with my lifts, actually break away from that and get back to like the more classic CrossFit, respect the heavy days, pour your heart and soul into that and do nothing else. And even though they're quote unquote lifting less, they're getting in a much higher quality lifting session on so many levels and get better from that. So if somebody's in that rut, it's tough to think that you need to lift less, not more, but you might have to. It might be worth trying is all I would say.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good answer. A second question. This is a classic nutrition question. One of my favorites.
Okay.
And it goes a little something like this. Okay. I hear what you're saying about diet. What about food X? And they want to ask about a specific food in the context of a nutrition discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I hear what you're saying about, eating generally well, but what about bananas?
Right. Yes. Well, they have a very high glycemic load. You're going to get super overweight, Boz. You have a banana every day. An apple
Bananas
a day keeps
devil.
the doctor away, not the banana.
That's right. Okay.
There's multiple ways to answer this, right? There's the kind and empathetic way, and then there's probably how somebody like David Goggins would answer it. And the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. But I am of the opinion, that there's sadly, I think, a lot of people being almost taken advantage of is a way that I want to say, with everybody has to have this certain test run on your blood work and find out that you're this special, unique snowflake that has this particular allergy or whatever, and then you have to eliminate these foods. And there's most certainly some folks out there that fall into that category, that eliminating these 2 or 3 foods are somehow toxic to you and your life turned around. I do believe there's some people out there, but I don't think it's in the mass numbers that people would be led to believe, that are focusing on, asking that kind of a nuanced question. I am more of the opinion, and I've used this example before, the drone of scrutiny, that if you had this invisible drone that hovered over somebody's head invisibly and quietly and filmed all of their actions 24 hours a day for a month or two, every decision they made, everything they pulled out of the fridge, everything they bought at a restaurant, you would find out that the reason that their health markers aren't where they want them to be, or their body composition isn't where they want it to be, it wasn't the banana and it wasn't the specific food. It was, in all honesty, like you said before, that in a general theme, they're eating low quality, processed food and far more of it than they should. And I don't think most people realize how much they do. And I don't think they realize that until they do something like weigh and measure and track with some sort of high level of diligence that they can look back. And I've seen this happen so many times that people will swear to you, they will pass a polygraph being like, no, I eat really well. And you told me what the protein, carbohydrate, and fat ratio should be. And I'm here to tell you, I just know I'm darn close to that right now. That's how I live my life. And I'm like, Roger that. Just do me a solid and track your stuff anyway. And 99 times out of 100, they come back with this bewildered look on their face going like, wow, I didn't realize that things were kind of as out of control as they were. I'm nowhere near these percentages, and this one's wildly high, and this one's wildly low. And I had a really honest 2 weeks of eating, and I didn't realize how often I snacked, how often I went out with the boys for some beer and nachos, and I thought I only had one slice of pizza. Turns out I had 5 every time, and I just think it's all these small little decisions that you just don't realize in the moment, but they add up to a tidal wave, and people, instead of seeing all that, they want to focus on this one particular thing. Like, I think I'm salting my food too much. And that's what I think is making me go off the rails. It's like, maybe, but probably not. It's probably some other more basic fundamental, eat meats and vegetables, nuts and seeds, little starch, that's probably more of where the issue is, those foundational building blocks, the really big stuff. Somebody gave the nutrition lecture one time. I can't remember who it was. I wish I could give them credit. I feel like it might have been EC. And she basically said, or maybe it was Lisa Ray, think of this like you have a jar or a bucket, right? And you've got your protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And there are these 3 big rocks, and you can put them into the bucket.
Yeah.
And they take up the overwhelming majority of volume in that bucket. And then you have smaller pebbles that you put in, then fine grains of sand, right? Well, those 3 huge building blocks, the protein, carbs, and fat, those big rocks take up the most space. Those are the big knobs that when you turn, you're going to get the most bang for your buck out of. But there's something about human beings that it will get fascinated with one of the grains of sand and pull that grain of sand out and be like, I think this is the grain of sand that's derailing me. And it's like, you sure it's not the really 3 big building blocks that also have to be of wonderful quality as well? And I think most of the time that's where the error lies.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And the only thing I would add to that is the idea of context matters here as well. I think when people get fixated on singular foods as being either helpful or harmful, there's no analysis of how those foods are showing up. So for example, the banana one might be a little bit too silly, but let's take one like a glass of wine.
Sure.
People are like, well, what about alcohol? I'm like, okay, well, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about you're putting back a couple bottles every night? Or are we talking about once in a while, every other week, you go out with your wife and you have a glass of red wine? Those are completely different contexts, and the response to that is going to be completely different. So what are we really talking about? I think has to be at the forefront as well.
And that could be the case with something like, well, I have oatmeal every day for breakfast. Is oatmeal good or bad? It's like, well, I can't answer that question. Is oatmeal good or bad? Now, if I stood next to you in the kitchen and I saw, and I read the back of the container and it said, okay, a half a cup of oatmeal is 40 grams of carbohydrates. And then I saw you two cups. So therefore there's 160 grams of carbohydrates. It may not so much be that the oatmeal is quote unquote bad, is that you might be getting a load of sugar with your breakfast that you're utterly unaware because they're quote unquote steel cut oats, and the marketing said it was healthy for me. And so there's usually, like you said, more nuance, more context than just saying, is it bad that I have oatmeal with breakfast?
Yeah.
I don't know. I need way more information.
What else is going on?
Yeah. What else is going on?
Cool. Well, I had one more, but now I'm waffling on it. I don't know, but let's do it. Okay. So this has to do with athletes that play other sports.
Okay.
And, there's been long time criticism of CrossFit for including certain movements that in traditional strength and conditioning wouldn't be there. So for example, you have a tennis player and you're like, well, tennis players shouldn't do pull-ups, or, tennis players don't need to do clean and jerks. What is your response to something like that?
Oh, I wish you might know what I'm trying to find in my head. There was something, this somewhat of a similar question came up, I mean, a long time ago, Boz, like over a decade ago. And Glassman posted in the CrossFit message board an answer about this. And it was about the benefits of GPP and how, for example, getting a downhill skier more pull-ups made them a better downhill skier. Why is that? We don't know. But what we've found is even with athletes, doesn't matter how elite they are, you give them 2 or 3 sessions in the gym and you will, with variance, you will find some things that they are deficient at, that they're not good at. And addressing these deficiencies, even if at the time they seem utterly and completely unrelated to the demands of their sport, but by helping these deficiencies and trying to improve them, will make them a better athlete in ways that are difficult to describe from an exercise science or physiology standpoint based upon our knowledge at this time. And this kind of relates to something you mentioned earlier when you were talking about the fact that it is effective. Precisely why at the cellular level is it effective? Not quite sure, but I can tell you that it works. And he also had some great line that I'm going to mess up. There was said something along the line of, the human body is not so well understood that highly specialized sport-specific programs are optimally effective, for specific athletic endeavors. That once again, getting back to GPP, variance, identifying weaknesses and shoring up those weaknesses, even in ways that aren't obvious, yield the best results. So that would be, and I'm of the perspective that, the human body is one piece, right? And whether you're pushing, pulling, hinging at the hips, squatting, that even if there's not an obvious below parallel squat in tennis. So, why would I have to squat? Why can't I just do power cleans and power movements? Like, there is this transferability that will benefit itself there. And that would be one of my largest comebacks for that one.
Yeah, cool. I think durability is also another key component to fitness as it relates to any sport. I think any athlete's career is largely going to be determined by how long they can engage in serious training without either burning out or incurring injury, or, even if it's just like an overuse type injury. And the more specific the groove of your training is, and the longer that specific groove gets worn in, the higher likelihood is that you're going to burn that thing out more quickly. And I've seen this. I had the good fortune of working with a youth rowing team in 2007 and 8, maybe 2009. But for a couple of years, we worked with the Marin Rowing Association, their youth rowing program. And these kids were beasts. I mean, they were already champions, I think, at the national level when we started working with them. So we couldn't claim any sort of objective performance increase in what they were doing. They're already at the top of the game. And, we came in, we taught them dry land training. We showed them how to deadlift and squat and, do basic CrossFit workouts. We were doing Cindy and stuff like that. And you start asking, okay, if we're not making the kids objectively faster in the boat, what are we doing? And before long, the answer that started to emerge was, we're keeping more of the kids in the boat longer through the season.
Right.
The injury rate started to drop off. The burnout rate started to drop off. You had kids that were interested in training because it wasn't just sitting on an erg and grinding out another 5K or whatever it was. So there were these ancillary benefits to doing things that looked nothing like being in the boat for another session, that did have a dramatic impact on their ability to play their season. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. Like, it wasn't immediately obvious,
right?
But as you spent more and more time, you're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. This is a very good case for being generally well prepared.
And just the higher level of fitness, overall fitness, work capacity across broad time modal domains that you can achieve or bring to the table with your sport, ideally, right? I mean, this is a generalization, but the more conditioned you are, the stronger you are, the fitter you are, then ideally, as the game or the season drags on, you've got your sport-specific training, your swinging of the bat, your catching of the ball or whatnot. Well, hopefully in the 9th inning, in the final quarter or whatnot, when maybe the other team is starting to drag a bit, and when that fatigue sets in, your skill set generally deteriorates a little bit. Well, if you're operating at a better or a higher level, then hopefully you're able to perform your sport better than the opposing team because you're not suffering that same level of fatigue or being deconditioned. So I think there's a ton of benefit for GPP there as well, from which you then layer on your sport-specific training.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. I had one more thought about that. Athletes, what was I going to say? being
and a lot of this
robust.
is, if people are interested, then go back and listen to that episode we did with Stefan Roche, who specifically talks about CrossFit and collegiate strength and conditioning and being a resilient athlete and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, he's done it. Well, the one thing I remember, the one thing I want to talk about also was, I think when you start bringing in a general fitness mindset to an athlete that has a specific sport that they're engaged in, it really becomes a question of how much and how often, not whether or not they should be doing things outside of their sport.
Sure.
And I think the danger of somebody who's like very CrossFit centric is that that's what they're excited about. That's what they want these athletes to be doing. The athletes are probably going to have a good aptitude for it. And before you know it, they're doing CrossFit and they're not doing tennis or whatever else, at least not really, like maybe on paper. And so you have to have enough maturity as a coach or as somebody who's introducing them to these other methods to say, hey, look, like these can be great supplemental training, but you have to keep your eyes on the prize with what you're doing in your primary sport.
Yes.
So I think if you have that maturity, you'll be fine. But
I think Glassman used to say something back in the day, the lectures, which was like in the realm of like an MMA fighter. Like, look, I can train you and I'll make sure that you're not going to get winded and you're going to be strong as the fight goes on. But I can't promise you won't get knocked out in the first 10 seconds because I can't teach you how to defend or throw a punch. So you need to do your sport too.
Yep. You can't start, drifting to one side and then expect the other side to just be like amazing. So anyway.
100%.
All right, those were the ones I had back for you. That was fun.
That was fun. We may have to shotgun each other again here in the future. Okay, well, hopefully everybody found that beneficial, one way, shape, or form, as always. Thanks for tuning in. If you're listening just in an audio format, of course, we appreciate that, but head on over to the btwb YouTube channel. Check out this video. Hey, you know what? Give it a like. But then also under the comments, let us know what you thought. Are there other comments maybe you've seen out there in the dangerous internet of that we should address, things you hear all the time, misconceptions? We're always looking for good ideas, content, or people that we should interview. So leave those comments. Boz and I read them, and we appreciate it. But Adrian, thank you, my friend. Thanks for being open to this, and it's very cool that you didn't even want to hear them beforehand.
No, give it to me straight.
All right, everybody. Have some good workouts, and we will see you next time.